Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Creeping In, a podcast where we cover true crime, horrors, and the mysterious. I'm your host, Marissa Stevens. Thank you for joining me here for another episode. Now, let's head down the path of today's stories. I'm sure many of us have local cases that are just cemented into our minds and give us a grim reminder that horrible crimes are committed everywhere, including in our own backyards. One case I will never be able to get out of my head, partially because it's quite local to me, and partially because of its awful and infamous nature, is the case of the Butcher of Kingsbury Run, also known as the Kingsbury Run Murders or the Torso Murders. This case takes us all the way back to the 1930s, a time that you're probably most familiar with for the Great Depression or the years just before we entered into World War II. Of course, very famously, John D. Rockefeller started his Standard Oil Company here, and while I have very select and unfavorable opinions on the Rockefellers, this did put this Ohio city on the map for the oil refining industry. In the 1920s, Cleveland, Ohio was beginning to experience real growth in terms of both population and business opportunities. Immigrants made their way into the city to join the workforce in industrial work as well as manufacturing. So, while the early and mid 1920s treated the city quite well, it was all about to come crashing down, literally. There was already an ordinary downturn in the economy during 1929, and this was made infinitely worse when the stock market crashed on Tuesday, October 29th of 1929, which is also known as Black Tuesday. This signaled the beginning of the Great Depression, which hit Cleveland quite hard. While people tried to rebuild and recover from this devastating economic burden, something dark and horrific began to take shape and caught the attention of locals rather quickly. 13 murders in total were committed over the course of 4 years between 1934 and 1938. These gruesome murders resulted in all the victims being decapitated, most of which were done while the victims were still alive, which is just sickening, honestly. To this day, no one has been charged for these acts, and no suspect was ever formally identified, although the lead detective on this case had his suspicions, which we'll get into later on. In the 1930s, Kingsbury Run was a dangerous, dark place where those who were unable to get back on their feet following the Depression seemed to take kindly to the area. A sort of congregation of homelessness and misfortune made the area known for its filthy and unsafe conditions. The run is located from the Flats to East 90th Street. Ironically enough, today the Flats is an area of downtown Cleveland that is known for its trendy bars and cutesy restaurants that attract quite the crowd and is a common spot to go out for people, especially in their 20s and 30s. To the east of the run was an area referred to as the Roaring Third or the Third Police Precinct, as well as bars, gambling houses, and brothels. The start of this infamous case began in September of 1934 when a young male located the remains of a woman, aged in her mid-30s, washed up along the Lake Erie shore east of the Bracknell area. Her torso was discovered with her legs amputated at the knees. Upon searching the area, few other parts of her remains were able to be collected, however, and most disturbingly, her head was never found. The county coroner had noted a type of chemical preservative on the skin that turned the area red and leathery. This first murder was actually not thought to be a part of this case until 2 years after the fact. The female victim was never identified and was given the nickname the Lady of the Lake, but once the murder had been deemed part of the official kill count, she was referred to as victim number 0. A year after this tragic killing is when the case was officially opened up. Also, as we move forward, I just want to note, so it doesn't get confusing, that the first victim is victim number 0, and the subsequent victims will follow that numerical order. So victim number 0 is first, and victim 1 would technically be the second victim. I'm not sure why it was done this way, but just so there's not any confusion as we continue, victim number 0 is really victim number 1, making victim number 1 really victim number 2, so you understand the flow of things here. Now, September 1935. Two teenage boys discover the remains of a man decapitated at the base of a hill where East 49th Street is a dead end right into Kingsbury Run. The victim was found entirely unclothed except for the socks on his feet. He had rope burns around both of his wrists, and the body was drained of blood but appeared to be otherwise clean. The cause of death was determined to be decapitation. Fingerprints identified him as Edward Andrassi, a 28-year-old man. While searching the area, a third victim, who would be known as victim number 2, was also discovered in nearly the same state as Mr. Andrassi. Decapitated, unclothed, and covered with the same type of preservative as the first victim, victim number 0. According to reports, the body had been there for several weeks, and the victim was an unidentified 40-year-old male. So far, what we can say is the killer definitely didn't discriminate on gender. The first victim was female, followed by 2 males. I don't know if he was just using the victim of opportunity, whoever was there at the time. That remains unknown. And that's just me speculating around here and running things through my head. Fast forward to January 1936, where the remains of a female were found by a local woman. The remains were wrapped in newspaper and packed in 2 half-bushel baskets. And for reference, a bushel basket is a large, round, wickery-style basket that you would typically see fruits and vegetables in, and you especially see them around the fall time, mainly used for decor or storage. The bushel baskets were found next to the Hart Manufacturing Building on Central Avenue. The remainder of the body, not including the head, was found 10 days after in a vacant lot by Orange Avenue. Just like the previous 2 victims, the cause of death was determined to be decapitation. However, in this case, the killer had waited for rigor mortis to set in before dismantling the body, which is when the joints and muscles stiffen in the hours following death. Police used fingerprints to identify victim number 3 as Florence Flo Polillo, who worked as a waitress and a bartender living at East 32nd Street and Carnegie Avenue. 1936 was a grievous year for Cleveland, with multiple residents falling victim to this monstrous killer. After Florence Polillo's January discovery, 2 boys discovered the head of a 40-year-old male wrapped up in a pair of pants near the East 55th Bridge in June of 1936. The following day, another victim, victim number 5, was found in front of the Nickel Plate Road police building. Just like victim number 2, Edward Andrassi, victim number 5 was decapitated, drained of blood, and clean. While they did recover fingerprints, as well as 6 unique tattoos in various locations along his body, the police were sadly unable to identify the man. A plaster recreation of victim number 5's head was placed on display at an expo in 1936, where it was viewed by more than 1,000 patrons. It is now on display at the Cleveland Police Museum. Which, to me, that's kind of eerie. Like, I don't know if I would want my head to be recreated and on display, but it is what it is. 2 months later, in September of 1936, while attempting to hop onto a train at East 37th Street, a man tripped over the upper half of a male torso. Talk about being completely shocked and horrified. After searching a nearby pool, which was more akin to a sewer, the lower half of the torso and parts of both legs of the male were located and recovered by a diver. It's estimated that over 600 residents came to watch this recovery effort. Victim number 6, set to be in his late 20s, was never identified, but shared the now common cause of death being decapitation. The marks left from the dismemberment of the body were noted by the coroner to appear to be the work of a competent offender, with little to no hesitation marks and a clean, single stroke that removed the head of the victim. It's very likely that this killer had some familiarity with the human anatomy, especially to be able to carry out a clean severing of a head of all things. At this time, the media had a plethora of tragedies to report, but no leads and no suspects to name. Cleveland police had Detective Murillo and Detective Zalewski assigned to the case full-time, during which the 2 men had interviewed more than 1,500 people. Which, can you just imagine, for a second, interviewing 1,500 people and still not being able to get a lead? It had to be incredibly frustrating and disheartening for those 2 detectives, and especially for the community as a whole. A few months later, in February of 1936, a man discovered the upper half of a female torso that had washed up onto shore just east of the Bracknell area. Victim number 7, A mid-20s female was the first victim to have the cause of death be something other than decapitation, although that didn't spare her from the brutal act. It was determined that she was already deceased when the killer removed her head, though I was unable to find what the cause of death was actually ruled. The lower half of her torso washed up on shore 3 months after the original discovery near East 30th Street. Like many others throughout the case, she was never identified. In the summer of June 1937, a teen boy had the unlucky privilege of uncovering a human skull found under a bridge. And as if that already wasn't bad, next to this skull was a burlap sack filled with the skeletal remains of a roughly 40-year-old female. She was identified through dental records. Her name was Rose Wallace, one of the victims able to be identified throughout this reign of terror. Her name was Rose Wallace, one of 3 victims able to be identified throughout this reign of terror. Despite following every bit of information pertaining to Wallace, no progress in finding the assailant was made. In July of 37, the National Guard had been sent to keep order due to an outrage regarding labor in the flats, and this time a guardsman that was keeping watch near the West 3rd Bridge had seen a piece of a body emerging from the Cuyahoga River. Over the course of the following days, the full body, aside from the head, would become victim number 9, who was a mid to late 20s male. Upon finding these remains, an escalation seemed to be apparent, with the abdomen gutted and the heart ripped out of his body. And I have to say, I feel like that is just so brutal and maybe barbaric is the word, just awful. The following year, in April of 1938, a workman on his way to start the day came across what he originally thought to be a dead fish along the Cuyahoga River bank, turned out to actually be the lower half of a woman's leg. This was the first piece of remains to be found from victim number 10. Police would later encounter 2 burlap sacks, once again, floating down the river, the contents being the majority of the remainder of both legs from the victim. This is the first instance where drugs were found in the victim's system, leaving investigators to speculate if the drugs were used to weaken or immobilize the victim, or if she had simply been a drug user. This adds to the now long list of unidentified victims. Months later, on August 16, 1938, scrap collectors who were searching a dump site uncovered a female torso wrapped up twice, first in a blue double-breasted men's blazer, and second in an old quilt. The limbs were found in a makeshift box, wrapped in butcher paper and rubber bands, the head discovered in similar wrappings. The coroner determined that these parts of the remains seemed like they could have been refrigerated, which is honestly just appalling and downright heinous, if you ask me. This victim, victim number 11, was never identified, along with our final victim, victim number 12, which they located a mere yards away from victim number 11. Safety Director Elliot Ness had a plain view of these remains from his office, and it was thought that the dump site may have been chosen in order to taunt Ness. 2 days later, a bit past midnight on August 18th, Ness, along with 11 squad cars, 3 fire trucks, and 2 police vans, raided a collection of shacks and shanties, desperate to uncover a lead. After gathering 63 men, they searched these makeshift homes and set them on fire. Ness received heavy criticisms for these actions, and rightfully so. As we know, violence isn't really the best course of action, and this ultimately did nothing to propel the investigation forward. And I just have to add that this is really, really sad for all those people who are already down on their luck, living in shanties and clearly less than ideal conditions, to have their living quarters burned to the ground in an effort to make progress in a case, and in doing so, literally no extra progress was made. This takes us to July of 1939, when a 52-year-old man named Martin O'Donnell was arrested for the murder of victim number 3, Flo Polillo, on account of the fact that he confessed, which, yes, I am saying with air quotes, because the confession was more of a combination of coercion and incoherent bits and pieces. Before a trial could take place, O'Donnell was found dead in his cell after hanging himself, along with 6 broken ribs believed to be obtained while he was in custody. The torso murderer was never formally identified, but many believe it to be a man named Francis E. Sweeney, described as a troubled yet intelligent surgeon that resided near the Kingsbury Run. Sweeney was interrogated by both Ness and other high ranking investigators, but no physical evidence was ever found to peg him as the murderer, and he never provided a confession. Despite this, it's important to note that after Sweeney committed himself to a sanatorium, no further murders had been committed. So, while we may never concretely know who the killer is, the speculation that Sweeney is the guy seems to be the general consensus. In the end, no one was ever made to pay for these despicable acts. 13 victims in total, and only 3 ever stood to be identified. Like I mentioned at the start of this episode, this is very local to me, and my great grandma was actually growing up around this time, pretty close by to where this all went down. Even though this happened over 90 years ago, it's still so chilling and just awful for the families that had to go through this experience. Sick acts like this still happen today, as we know, and it's a good reminder to always stay alert. It also is a huge disappointment that no one ever had to pay for these crimes, especially with so many victims, 13 in total, that no one ever had to do any time for. I feel if this happened today, it would have been significantly easier to find the perpetrator, especially because there's so much better technology in terms of DNA and obviously camera evidence and things like that. But it's still pretty astonishing that this was able to be carried out, especially to a total of 13 victims. That's pretty significant. All right, that's going to wrap things up for this episode. Go over to our Instagram page, which is Creeping In Podcast, and leave me your thoughts on this case on the post for this episode. Or you can also leave a comment on our YouTube channel, which is Creeping In Pod. If you have a suggestion for an episode or want to share a personal story, please email me at creepinginpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to support this show and continue to get more content like this, please take a minute to leave a review, as this really does help us to reach more people. Thank you so much for listening. Please stay safe, and I will chat with you guys next time.